Are tech giants the new governments? So Amazon and Facebook and Google and Netflix, they don't fix roads and bridges and they don't do public education. But, their influence is ever increasing and the reliance that people have on them is increasing. And it's not out of the realm of possibility that they're moving more into public functions that otherwise seem to be strictly of government. Let me explain, because that's kind of a lot to chew on and digest. So it used to be that people relied, I think, more on, tribes, and tribes could also include, religions. So it was like whoever you were associated with in your village or your, neighborhood, or prehistoric times in your cave, that was kind of your community. And then, over a period of time, things moved more to the farms and then more to the factories. Now we're in the information age. And people at one time identified with their companies. You had like one company for life, but that's kind of like a little bit transitory now. And I think we have kind of like more of a financialization of society. The financial sector is much, much bigger than it ever has been. And that's part of the reason why, these recessions can happen like in 2008, especially when things obviously get, misused. And so the way that we get our identities and comfort and needs met is kind of evolving in this way as financial markets flow. And the governments, have historically been here to, meet people's needs and still do. But we have kind of a consumerization now mentality and proclivity, as things become more globalized, and tech companies are becoming more powerful than even nation states. Like, Facebook has, Amazon and Microsoft have about $1 trillion valuation. Microsoft is over $1 trillion, which is larger than, most countries. And countries are having a hard time, regulating tech companies because of, not only tax dodges, but the sophistication and pace of innovation. Like you see when Mark Zuckerberg and other executives get grilled in Congress, that it's hard for regulators to keep up with the innovation and technology. It's hard for them to know even what to look at and what questions to ask. And when you hear the questioning, that becomes kind of obvious. So as people become more and more dependent on companies like Amazon, has I think somewhere around two-thirds of households signed up for Prime. And then they went to free 2-day shipping, then they went to free 1-day shipping. And we're becoming kind of a consumer mentality. I mean, people are getting more and more into content, and Netflix is really big, and Amazon Prime Video. And as we come to rely on companies more and more, it's not out of the realm of possibility that companies will start taking on more public functions as well. There's already talk about, companies responding to stakeholders, not only shareholders, and doing things for the public good. I think that's kind of the beginning of it, like a more holistic approach. And companies are, especially the big companies, are by and large starting to become seen as the saviors kind of society. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I think it depends how it's applied. I think it can be very good, or, there can be negative things also, but if it's applied well, there can be benefits. Like, for example, Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, he just wrote a new book, Trailblazer, where he talks about how Salesforce has donated millions of dollars to the community. Like, they're really involved in the homeless problem in San Francisco. They devoted a huge amount of free software to nonprofits. And the whole idea about companies just being separate from their communities and their workers, and only beholden to the bottom line is quickly changing. I mean, I think companies are not going to last as long because especially younger millennials and others, I mean, it's true for everybody, but each generation seems to be more and more concerned about the, the social aspects of companies. And you never used to hear that much when I was growing up about, social aspects of companies. It was more profit driven. So I think increasingly, to the question of are the giant tech companies the new governments? tech companies are becoming more and more powerful, and as a result, governments are becoming less powerful. As tech companies get much, much bigger, because the law of accelerating turns, like right now the top companies are about $1 trillion, but like companies like Uber and Airbnb, they're getting to like 50, 75 billion just in a few years. And companies are getting much, much bigger, much, much quicker. And some people say that like with artificial intelligence and breakthrough technology like that we could have $10 trillion companies soon. And when you have tech companies that are much, much bigger than all or most governments, then the power tends to flow to where the money goes, and people are going to expect more and more and more out of their companies. So it's possible increasingly that giant tech companies will take on more of some of the functions that would traditionally apply to governments and be considered as such.